Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, talking once again about logic and proportion. People on the political left tend to be extremely irrational about any science topic. And when it comes to viruses, anyone who questions the official narrative is immediately labeled as a monster. It used to be government of the people, by the people, and for the people, but now it's shut up and do what we say. Julia Hartley-Brewer, who runs a talk show in the UK, tweeted, "Just 377 healthy people under 60 have died of COVID. Yes, that's sad, but we've locked down an entire country for a virus that mostly kills the very old and the very sick. The rest of us should be free to decide our own risks." And she got this angry response from someone named Rachel Clark. "Imagine caring so little about 80,000 lives lost to COVID, of dismissing that staggering death toll because most of the patients are over 60, of carving up the nation into one tier worth saving, another worth sacrificing. The tweet isn't merely wrong, it's morally repugnant." So Rachel is fine with destroying the lives of tens of millions of young, healthy people in order to pretend we're doing something to help the elderly and sick population. There's no evidence that government actions have accomplished anything other than destroy the economy, destroy lives, and destroy freedom. The idea of a lockdown came from communist Chinese propaganda, and the left immediately adopted it. The UK government locked down the country back in March for what they said was 2 weeks, and here we are at the end of the year, and they're still locked down. The government has no clue what they're doing, and they are quite literally ruining the country. And here's a guy which I had a discussion with today on Twitter, Evan Shapiro. Trump is golfing in Florida. Pence is skiing in Vail. They killed U.S. troops' raises. They killed your unemployment benefits. They're vacationing using your money. They're laughing at you. So I pointed out to him that Vice President Pence is bringing a lot of business into Vail, which nearly went bankrupt because of the shutdowns in the spring. I drove through Vail last week, and people there are thrilled to be able to do some business again. When I drove through Vail in March, the place was a ghost town. I also pointed out to him that in most of the U.S., cases peaked about a month ago and they're plummeting now, including in Colorado. And I pointed out to him that heart disease and cancer kill far more people in the United States than COVID-19 has. The 300,000 claimed COVID-19 deaths sounds like a large number, but a lot of people die in the U.S. all the time. In 2018, more than 600,000 people died from heart disease in the U.S., and about 600,000 died from cancer. The United States also loses huge numbers of people to accidents, chronic lower respiratory diseases, stroke, Alzheimer's, diabetes, influenza, pneumonia, and rounding out the top 10 is nephritis and suicide. Leftists can't really use these numbers for political propaganda. More than 20 million Americans died while Barack Obama was president. It's a shame that people die, and 300,000 claimed COVID-19 deaths is not a small number, but it's important to keep the numbers in perspective. A lot of people die every day, on average about 9,000 people in the United States. So Evan responded to me with the usual leftist hysteria. "It would be great if you stopped being so full of it, Tony. By the way, if wearing a mask or social distancing stopped cancer, would you tell people not to do it? What happened in your childhood that makes you urge people to ignore science and facts to risk their lives?" So he threw out the usual propaganda that masks work, and then he says that he's got science on his side. But a recent study from the CDC showed that 85% of COVID-19 cases were among people who wore masks always or often. Lots of people who are at high risk and shouldn't be out in public think they're safe because they're wearing a mask. And lots of very low-risk young people are running around wearing masks because they've also been fed misinformation. Evan also told me that COVID-19 is past heart disease as the top U.S. killer. But this study from Johns Hopkins University tells a completely different story. When taking a closer look at the death numbers, the author noted something strange. She compared the number of deaths per cause during that period in 2020 to 2018. She noticed that instead of the expected drastic increase across all causes, there was a significant decrease in deaths due to heart disease. Even more surprising, as seen in the graph below, the sudden decline in deaths is observed for all other causes. The reality is that lots of deaths which should have been attributed to something else are now being attributed to COVID-19. This shouldn't surprise anyone for several reasons. One reason is that regular medical care was shut down for much of the year, and many people are still afraid to go to the hospital to get treatment which they need. Lots of people are dying directly as a result of the lockdowns. And it's also known that PCR tests produce about 90% false positives. So lots of people's death certificates are getting COVID-19 on them when they didn't actually die from COVID-19. There's been some criticism of this study, but I've seen very similar data from several other sources. A number of states in my part of the country have seen COVID-19 cases drop off very dramatically. Two of these states are Montana and South Dakota. Montana has had a mask mandate in place for many months. South Dakota had no lockdowns or mask mandates. Yet the result in the two states was nearly identical. Montana had a very early mask mandate. North Dakota had one here. Wyoming had one here. South Dakota had no mask mandate. Yet we get essentially the same shaped curve in many different states, showing that the mask mandates and lockdowns don't actually accomplish anything. Evidence shows that the virus is going to circulate through the population pretty much independent of government policy. Here in Wyoming, we're supposed to be a sensible state, yet the governor issued a mask mandate at a point when it made no sense. Cases were already dropping off sharply, and all that the mask mandate did was increase superstition. The school system here in Cheyenne, Wyoming did this to children. Based on how these children are dressed, you would think we're experiencing a zombie apocalypse. Yet there have been no deaths under the age of 19 in the entire state of Wyoming, and very few under the age of 50. And a very similar pattern for the entire U.S. This graph is from the CDC. Most of the deaths have been in nursing homes, which have been locked down and isolated for the entire period. Julia Hartley Brewer is exactly right. We're ruining the lives of millions and millions of young people for absolutely no reason. The lockdowns and the mask mandates have accomplished nothing. This all started out as 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Boulder Public Schools in Colorado shut down on March 13th. And now, 9 months later, those schools are still closed. There's no logic or proportion to the thinking of the left. They simply get hysterical and nothing else matters. What Julia Hartley Brewer was saying is nothing new. We've known this for 9 months. On March 18th, Bloomberg reported 99% of those who died from virus had other illnesses, Italy said. More than 75% had high blood pressure, about 35% had diabetes, and a third suffered from heart disease. The average age of those who've died from the virus in Italy is 79.5 years old. As of March 17th, only 17 people under 50 years old had died from the disease. All of Italy's victims under 40 have been males with serious existing medical conditions. The approach which should have been taken, and what I was advocating from day one, was protecting the elderly and allowing the young, healthy, low-risk population to get on with their lives. Our economies and civilization would be in much better shape now had they done that. All of the government actions which have been taken so far have accomplished little or nothing. The main thing they've done is destroy millions of lives and destroy our way of life. But people on the political left get hysterical if you challenge them because they're in love with government tyranny. The views of the left have little to do with science, logic, proportion, or reason. Their views are driven by fear, emotion, superstition, and hysteria. Toto is not very impressed by the thinking of the left. You can visit him and Kyrie on the web at realclimatescience.com.